Alrighty, so when the powers that be passed along this suggestion today, I wanted to challenge myself by not talking about a single Ed and Lorraine Warren case, and stick to only one of the most major horror flicks of all time, in my mind. So the goal for you today, dear viewer, is to let me know by the end of this if I accomplished my goal. And if I failed, well gosh darn it, maybe I'll dress up like a Barbie or princess again soon. Your choice. Let's get to it, shall we? In our opening spot today, we have none other than Borderland. Ryder Strong and Sean Astin starred in this film that centers on three friends who head down to Mexico to celebrate their college graduation, but stumble upon a cult that practices human sacrifice. The film is loosely based on the life of Adolfo Constanzo, an American-born serial killer and cult leader who moved to Mexico City as an adult, where he met friends who would become his future followers. Constanzo was also baptized Catholic and served as an altar boy, but then he accompanied his mother on trips to Haiti to learn about voodoo. As a, adolescent, he became apprenticed to a local sorcerer and began to practice a religion called Palo Mayombe, which involves animal sacrifice. As an adult, Constanzo moved to Mexico City and met the men who were to become his followers: Martin Quintana, George Montes, and Omar Orea. They began to run a profitable business, casting spells to bring good luck, which involved expensive ritual sacrifices of chickens, goats, snakes, zebras, and even lion cubs. Many of his clients were rich dealers and hitmen who enjoyed the violence of Constanzo's magical displays. He also attracted other rich members of Mexican society, including several high-ranking corrupt policemen who introduced him to the city's powerful cartels. Specifically, his cult was said to be associated with the notable Gulf Cartel. Constanzo started to raid graveyards for human bones to put in his cauldron, but before long his cult decided that the spirits of the dead would be stronger, ergo providing the cult more powerful protection with live human sacrifices instead of old bones. The resulting killings soon totaled more than 20 victims, whose mutilated bodies were found in and around Mexico City. This process escalated until Constanzo eventually decided that the gang needed the power of a brain from an American student, culminating with the 1989 killing of Mark Kilroy. So Constanzo was nicknamed the Godfather by his cult members, or El Padrino, and he led the cult with Sarah Aldrete, who the followers nicknamed the Godmother, La Madrina. The cult was involved in multiple ritualistic killings in Matamoros, including, the Mark Kilroy one that I just mentioned. So, the film adaptation was given an approval rate of 100% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 8 views, with an average rating of 6.8 out of 10. Chloe Pacey from Dread Central gave the film a score of 4 out of 5, commending the film's performances, realistic characters, and overexposed look. Scott Kalura from IGM commended the film's realistic feel, writing every once in a while a film can defy expectations, and this one was one such case. He mentioned that it was a great watch and scary enough on its own, even if you didn't know the historical content. Which, hey, now you all know the context, so you could enjoy it even more. Next up we have The Rite. Gosh, what a doozy. It is a 2011 supernatural horror film directed by Michael Hafstrom and written by Michael Petroni. It is loosely based on Matt Baglio's book, The Rite, The Making of a Modern Exorcist, which itself is based on actual events as witnessed and recounted by American, then exorcist in training, Father Gary Thomas, and his experiences of being sent to Rome to be trained and work deeply with veteran clergy of the practice. To research the book, Baglio participated in a seminar on exorcism by the Vatican-sponsored Pontifical Athenaeum, Regina Apostolorum, where he met Father Gary Thomas, a parish priest from Sacred Heart Church in Saratoga, California, who was tasked by the local bishop in San Jose to become an exorcist for the diocese. Initially skeptical and reluctant, Father Gary becomes an apprentice to the Rome-based exorcist, and his skepticism is soon replaced by the cold reality of evil and the ways it sometimes takes the form of demonic possession. The book traces Father Gary's life prior to and subsequent to the acquaintance in 2005, which involved Baglio observing over 20 exorcisms performed by Father Gary. Baglio indicates that the experience in writing the book was just a very spiritual process and in a lot of ways helped him reconnect to the church and understand the value of faith. This isn't something that is silly in prayer, it was very important. While Baglio was still researching his book, producers Trip Vinson and Beau Flynn, who had already produced The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I'll be talking about that later, learned about Baglio's book proposal and decided to purchase the movie rights. The producers contacted Michael Petroni, who was one of the writers for The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of Dawn Treader, to write the screenplay, and Petroni, a practicing Catholic, coordinated the development of his screenplay with Baglio, who was now reading the book at about the same time. It's a race to the finish. Hafstrom was invited to direct the film and was intrigued by the fact that he would be working from facts, not just somebody's imagination. So while the film is focused on demonic possession and exorcism, Hafstrom also believes that this story is about a young man finding himself and finding his way. In preparation for the film, Hafstrom attended some exorcisms in Rome, but was never present in the actual room, but he could still hear what was taking place. Father Gary served as a consultant on the set of the film and indicated that the exorcisms in the film were very accurate with some expected licenses taken, which is super chilling to think about. The film stars Anthony Hopkins, Colin O'Donoghue, Alice Braga, Sharon Hinds, and Rutger Hauer. How did I find out about this movie? Well, I was a big fan of Once Upon a Time back when it was on the air. Specifically, Captain Hook. Something about a bad boy in guyliner will always do it for me. Alright, we're moving on before Alexa starts swooning and debating a rewatch. Ever heard of Stuck? I think it's a bit of a lesser known title, but hey, correct me if I'm wrong, you're pretty good for that. After committing a hit and run where a victim becomes launched in a windshield, a young nursing assistant named Brandy, played by Mina Suvari, tries to figure out her next course of action. Brandy is based on Shante Joanne Mallard, a Texan woman who hit Gregory Glenn Biggs, a homeless man, and left him embedded in her windshield until he died. At the time, Mallard was believed to have been driving well intoxicated by a combination of giggleweed, fun powder, and booze. Yeah, have fun deciphering that mess. You don't want to know how long it took me to find words to substitute the originals with that weren't going to result in this video getting knocked off the interweb. Mallard then drove home, leaving the injured Biggs stuck in her windshield, and parked her car in her garage. After the accident, Mallard did not notify the police, and she didn't get Biggs any medical attention, even though she was a nursing assistant at the time. Every once in a while, she'd return to the garage to check on his status, and he died several hours later. Imagine dying out over that long. That's the actual worst, no thank you. So afterwards, Mallard called a male friend, Clyde Jackson, for assistance. Mallard, Jackson, and Jackson's cousin, Herbert Tyrone, took the body to a park and left it there, even going so far as to set a fire to the car in an attempt to disguise the evidence. The three were later each convicted on charges of tampering with evidence for this action. Mallard became a suspect after she was reported talking and laughing about the incident at a party about 4 months after the events. She was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison for her crime. Well, let the record show that hubris was the downfall of a crime somebody could have apparently gotten away with. Seriously, she and her buddies went through all that work to dispose of the body and hid the evidence, only for her to get busted from bragging about it? Like, I see this all the time with people bragging about committing crimes on TikTok and whatnot. Like, folks, do the words digital footprint and statute of limitations mean nothing to you? I do have to mention that the movie adaptation rightfully attracted some criticism for whitewashing, which So Mina Suvari, who I mentioned before, she is a white actor, and she played the character based on Shante, who is of African American descent. And she did this while wearing cornrows, which, yikes. Learn from your mistakes, folks. Alrighty, I've left you waiting long enough. Time to talk about the Exorcism of Emily Rose. This is definitely a situation where my bias comes into play, since the real case behind this flick is a favorite tragedy of mine. After performing an exorcism on the young Emily Rose, played by Jennifer Carpenter, a priest is sent to jail for her death. But when a lawyer picks up the case, they may have no choice but to believe the unbelievable. What really happened to Emily Rose? In ultra-religious circles, exorcisms are, of course, a very real and not outmoded practice. Even The Exorcist was loosely based on an actual incident. But The Exorcism of Emily Rose is more specific in its inspiration. This movie intertwines supernatural horror with a courtroom drama, exploring the tragic consequences that followed a young woman's alleged possession. Director Scott Derrickson blends those facts with a liberal sprinkling of fiction, creating an interesting mix of psychological thriller, demonic horror, and courtroom drama. So, what's the real story? Back in 1975, a young German woman named Anneliese Michel began experiencing seizures and hallucinations. She would black out at school and began walking around in what her friends and family described as a trance-like state, and she couldn't recall any of it. A year later, Anneliese experienced a similar occurrence, where she woke up in a trance after her body went through a series of convulsions, causing it to shake uncontrollably. So after this, Anneliese visited a neurologist who diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, a disorder that causes seizures, loss of memory, and experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations. But the medication she was given failed to help her, so as the year progressed, her condition got way worse. She began to see the face of the devil wherever she went, and constantly heard demons whispering in her ears. When she heard the demons telling her she was damned and would rot in hell while she was praying, she concluded that the devil himself must be possessing her. But the knowledge that she was possessed consuming her, poor thing constantly ripped the clothes off her body, compulsively performed up to 400 squats a day, crawled under a table, barked like a dog, she even ate spiders and coal, bit the head off of a dead bird, licked her own fluids from the floor. Poor thing. So at the begging of her Catholic parents, 2 local priests initiated dozens of exorcism rites until she eventually passed from malnutrition, and her parents were then charged with negligent homicide. It's just an awful situation all around. Okie dokie, we're ending today with the most popular title on our list, Nightmare on Elm Street. Now this prompted me to ask a friend of mine if I was the last person to find out this was based on a true story, and well, she left me unread. So I guess you'll have to let me know in the comments. The film is credited with carrying on many tropes found in low-budget horror films of the 70s and 80s, which originated in John John Carpenter's 1978 horror film Halloween, including the morality play that revolves around schmexual promiscuity in young folks, resulting in their eventual death, leading to the term slasher film. Wes Craven's 1984 masterpiece centers on a killer who stalks his prey while they're sleeping. In an interview with Vulture for the film's 30th anniversary, the late Craven shared that the film's premise was inspired by newspaper articles from the Los Angeles Times about male Southeast Asian refugees who died in their sleep. Many men would reportedly refuse to sleep because of the nightmares that they feared would lead to death, with a total of 26 men passing away in 1981. By the way, in 2021, A Nightmare on Elm Street was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. By the way, in 2021, A Nightmare on Elm Street was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, and I absolutely agree with that. And that brings us to the end of our time once again, and I think I've curated the perfect playlist for the next time I host a scary movie marathon. I've been Alexa, your resident nookie spooky girly, and if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more horror content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.